Alright, so we're group 6 and we did elections and campaigns. So basically for all the information that you need to know for this chapter, this kind of group of information, we broke it down into these 3 essential goals that we're just going to try to cover here. So the first one is just detailing the different aspects of running for president. 2 is congressional elections and what you really need to know about them. And then 3 is how has the election process changed over time.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about running for president in today's race. And there are 3 main things that a candidate needs to focus on, and that's organization, strategy, and money. The first thing is organization, and so basically the campaign is kind of like a business, and they're trying to sell a product to you. So they have people that are in finance and marketing, press secretaries to manage the press, and they have personal assistants. They have pretty much everything that a small business or a large business would have in order to get their product out so that people like it and they vote for the candidate. Next, the candidates are trying to focus on strategy, which is pretty big. And there are 4 parts of strategy. There's the tone, and they either have a positive tone, which is making themselves sound better, or they have a negative tone, which is making the other candidate sound worse. So that's like build me up, or tear him down is negative. And then there's also the theme, which is pretty much the campaign slogan, and that reflects the candidate as a whole. So that would just reflect their views and kind of what they're going to do if they get elected. And then there's timing, which is when they're going to use most of their resources so that they get the most bang for their buck, and then their campaign will be the most effective. And finally there's the target, which is where the candidate thinks their votes are going to be coming from, so that they need to focus on certain groups to get the most votes. And then finally, there's the big thing in today's election, and that's money. And it's kind of hard because there's a limit of $2,000 per individual for candidates, so that's not really enough money to do much campaigning. So the way around this is to have a political action committee, or a PAC, and the PACs don't have any limit on their spending or their income. So they spend the money for the candidate and make commercials and different campaign things for them. And they pretty much are why there's so many commercials for all the candidates. And the first political action committee was in 1944. And that is it.
Alright, so the next topic we're going to talk about is presidential versus congressional campaigns. So when you kind of list out the aspects of both of them, presidential campaigns are a much larger scale than congressional campaigns, obviously. They have much larger campaign funding. They're much more competitive due to congressional campaigns being affected by a large incumbency advantage, which I will get to in just a second. There's much more media coverage for presidential campaign, and there's much higher voter participation, all opposed to low voter turnout for congressional campaigns, especially in off years where there isn't a presidential election going on. And finally, these are also affected by malapportionment and gerrymandering, which I will also get to. And finally, both of them are kind of involved with this coattails effect, where basically a successful presidential candidate kind of creates this wave of sentiment, and congressional candidates can kind of use that sentiment for their political party and help kind of ride that feeling to victory. And so that's what they call the saying, riding someone's coattails into office. So, first of the 2 different things we have to get to here, first I'm going to cover the incumbency advantage. So, the incumbency advantage, basically, what an incumbent is that's the person who was holding office. It's the person currently in office. So in the House and in the Senate, there's a huge incumbency advantage where 90% of the time in the House, the incumbent will keep his seat in the House, and then a little bit, slightly less in the Senate. So basically, it's just the same people being reelected over and over again every year. And the reasons for that are, there's a couple different reasons for that. One, first you can talk about the perks of office. And basically what that is when you're a senator or congressman, you have a bunch of people working for you, and their full-time job is being a politician. And so when your competition maybe has to work another job to make money for themselves, or is constantly distracted by other things, your whole life is just centered around politics, which makes a huge difference when it comes to promoting yourself. Second, time. Again, same thing. These people, the people that are holding congressional office, that's their life. They are congressmen. That's all they do. Whereas other people have to, have other jobs. They might have to worry about other financial situations, organizing a new campaign, all these different things that they have to worry about. Whereas that's just their full-time job. Next, you have the last thing is money. So, being a congressman in Washington, D.C., you have a lot of access to money from lobbyists or wherever sources you want to get, especially if your name is out there. You just have a lot more exposure that gives you a huge advantage over these unnamed challengers that could possibly overcome or overthrow an incumbent. So, alright, so that's pretty much all you really need to know about the incumbency advantage. And then the last thing here is these two things that affect congressional elections, and that's malapportionment and gerrymandering. So basically, malapportionment is where congressional So basically, malapportionment is when congressional districts are set up within a state, and they're set up in a way where a huge amount of the population might be put in one district, and then you have a very small amount of population in another district, which essentially makes certain citizens' votes not as powerful as the next person's, which is obviously in violation of the Constitution. And that is why in 1964 the Supreme Court ruled that malapportionment needs to be eliminated in all states, and every state need to readdress their districts and reset up the boundary lines for all the congressional districts. So that's malapportionment, and then next you have gerrymandering, which is kind of the same thing where you draw congressional districts, but these are set up in a way that it gives one party an unfair advantage over another. So they draw like these unorthodox shapes in order to have more Republicans in one district than Democrats, and sort of swing more districts to whatever party they want. And that is it.
Now I'm going to talk about the 4 types of primaries in an election. First, you have your closed primary, and that's where only the members of the party can vote in their own party's primary election. Then you have the open primary, in which you can choose which party's primary you vote in. Then there's the blanket primary, where you can vote for either party in their primary, or in the primaries. Then there's the runoff primary, and that's if there is a candidate or if no candidate receives a majority, and they need to select their nominee for a candidate.
Alright, so basically this is a big, complex timeline of how the election process has changed since the foundations of America. Basically, we don't have time to go through all of this, or really any of this, so the most important things that you need to get out of it are the most important way that the election process has changed is media has become much more involved in the election process. Basically, with media slowly eking its way into every aspect of our lives, they have realized that they can now campaign in every aspect of our lives as well. And so with that expanded political advertisement also comes more spending, because if you're advertising more, you're also going to need more money for that. So that's kind of also been the cause of the increased campaign spending and the growth of these outrageously large political action committees and all these loopholes that they use to basically just spend ridiculous amounts of money to sell themselves to America. Alright, so the biggest dates on here, 1944 is the first political action committee under Franklin Roosevelt. Was basically campaigning for his re-election, but then he died the next year. 1960, first televised debate was Richard Nixon versus John F. Kennedy. It was pretty big because it showed the possible impact it could have, because the nervous, stuttering Nixon looked like nothing compared to the young and confident Kennedy, and a lot of people say that it cost Nixon the election that year. And that's really the most important thing, is just the biggest thing to understand is media and its involvement in our election process, and that's the most important piece of change that has happened to the election process.